Let's look at some of the selection methods in Illustrator. So the first thing I'll talk about is the selection tool, and you can see that that's the black arrow tool, or V on your keyboard will get you to that. So if you're using something like a brush, brushing around, you can hit V and get my direct selection tool. And I can select objects. In order to select an object, I simply click on that object. Click. Now I can move these around, I can change their size, I can do things like distort them a little bit. So that is how you select a single object. It'll select a group of objects like I have down here, or a single object. The next selection tool that you'll use a lot is the direct selection tool. So that's the white arrow. So black arrow is the selection tool, white arrow is the direct selection tool, and you get to that by hitting A. So I can go V, selection tool, A, direct selection tool. And what that does is it allows you to click on points. So this square is made up of 4 points. I can now click that point and drag it around with the direct selection tool. I can also drag a marquee over a selection and move it down. So grab multiple points and move them by dragging over them. Incidentally, when you're using the selection tool, you can do the same thing. Like if you just marquee around a selection around an object rather than clicking on it, just going over that object a little bit will highlight that object. If you want to select multiple objects, you can click over them like this. And even though I haven't completely encompassed the objects, whatever that marquee overlaps, it will select those objects. So with the direct selection tool, marking over a set like that will only select those points that you've marqueed over. So I can stretch this up and move it by doing that. The direct selection tool also allows you to modify handles on curves. So if I click this point that has a curve on it, I can now grab this handle and move this Bezier curve. You can also click directly on a curve and just drag it, and it will change that curve. So if I wanted to change this D, I can just click right on the edge and move this around. Undo that. Another tool you can use to select points is the lasso tool. So it doesn't matter what's selected, I can now drag around this. I can make a nice line. If I wanted to select only the inside points of this star, I can just make a little, oops, and I've missed one. So now I've got only those points selected. And now what I have to do to be able to manipulate those is hit A. So I'm going to hit A so I can get my direct selection tool back. And now I can move those points around. So selection tool, V, direct selection tool, A, lasso tool is Q. And the lasso tool is great if you have a complex object and you really want to just select a certain number of points and then move those around. So I could come in here and select only these objects. Or I could select this one and then these, which you could never do with just dragging a marquee. So really useful for that sort of thing. The other selection tool that Illustrator has is the group selection tool. I'm going to go ahead and just tear this off. Anytime you see a little caret like this, or an edge of a menu tab, it says tear off. I release that, and now it's torn those tools off into a separate palette, just like I have my pencil tools here. So the white arrow with the plus is the group selection tool. You'll notice if I try to use my selection tool and move this group, all I can do, no matter what I do, drag over, I'm getting the entire group. So all I can do is move this entire group around. The group selection tool allows me to marquee over a selection or just click on a selection and only move that component inside the group without ungrouping it. So you can see that I've got an appearance setting in here with the stroke around the entire group. So that's not changing. I can drag this over here and back onto it, and it's still making that overlapping stroke. So the group selection tool, after you've selected an object in your group, then you can use the direct select tool if you need to then highlight points and move them around. So that's a pretty useful tool. The other method for making selections in Illustrator uses the Layers palette. Right now you can see that there's this little radio button on the layers, and if I click that button, it selects everything in the layer. No matter what layer you're on, it will select only the things in that layer. And then there's this little rectangle next to it, and it's a large rectangle. And you can see that what that means is that I've selected everything in my layer. So I can drag over this, does the same thing. But if I only highlight or select the Dylan icon, you can see that icon changes to the small square. So that tells me that only a portion of my layer has been selected. So I'm going to make a new layer for my Dylan text. Just call that Dylan. And right now there's nothing in that layer. Turn it off, turn it on, doesn't change anything. But what you can see is if I grab this little rectangle and I drag it up into the layer above, what I've done now is move the selection that I had in that layer to the layer above. So now I have Dylan on its own layer. So I'll do that again with my group. So I've got a group, and so now I'm back in my original layer. I want to select my group, use the little rectangle or square, drag it up, and you can see it highlighting in the green layer now. Let go, and now let's place those items in that group. So I have Dylan group, group, and my original first layer. So just a quick overview of the selection options in Illustrator.